Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting, April 13th. We have a few planning items to do tonight and a couple other items, including having Aqua do a presentation, which we're looking forward to as well. And some good news that we just received was the Drayton Pharmacy is going to be able to give out vaccine now, which is fantastic. And vaccines are now open for people 16 and over to register. So both good news for our community as we go forward with COVID-19, and hopefully more and more people will get vaccinated. And I hope that everyone on council has been, and our staff have all signed up to be vaccinated. I know Larry gets his very shortly, which is good. And
we got ours. We got ours at noon today.
You got yours today. Perfect, Dennis. Congratulations on your vaccine for you and your wife. That's good that we get the vaccine. I know the county is pushing it. I know Curtis has heard it over and over again from his boss about getting the vaccine, and that's one of the ways we're going to get out of this pandemic sooner. I also know that Mapleton's been doing quite well, and I have to give a lot of kudos to our residents. We have 3 cases currently. I know that the cases have gone quite sky high in the last week in the Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph area. Manny and I were on a call on Monday, and it looked pretty bleak with the numbers going up and the rates per 100,000. But Mapleton's been doing quite well, and I just we want to keep asking our residents to continue to do what is best and to get vaccinated as soon as possible. With that, I'm going to ask if there's any declaration of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll move on to confirmation of minutes. I know there's a couple of changes in the confirmation of minutes that we need to change. One of them being Councillor Otten's. She had a notice of motion on the previous council that was withdrawn, and that was going to be sent off to the Parks and Rec Committee. So that needs to be noted in the minutes. And there is another notice of motion from Councillor Martin that is supposed to be on this agenda, but it was missed. So we will address that, Councillor Martin, on this agenda so we can have that discussion. Anything else from council on the confirmation of minutes? I don't see anything, so I'll just read it. That minutes of the Township of Mapleton Council meeting held on March 23rd, 2021 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda package. All those in favor? That is carried. Just hang on a minute. It seems. Did we lose Councillor Ottens?
No, she's still with us. She's
okay, I just lost her on my screen for some reason. Let me find her. There she is. Perfect. She got moved to the second page for some reason. All right, so that is carried. Thank you. Next, we have item 4.2, the recommendation that the minutes of the Township Council, Mapleton Council special meeting held on March 24th, 2021 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda package. Any questions, comments on that? All those in favor? That's carried. I don't believe we have any matters arising from the minutes. And we're going to our Planning Act. Right now, item 6.1. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and to give consideration to an application ZBA 2021-04 for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands are located at 6767 Wellington Road 9. And the purpose and effect is to rezone a portion of the property from agricultural to agricultural commercial to allow for the construction of a new facility to fabricate farm equipment. We will now hear from the clerk. Clerk Wheeler.
Staff confirmed the following. Property owners and agencies were provided with the required notice on March 24th. Proper postings were completed on March 24th. Planning staff did not include a draft bylaw tonight. That will be provided at the next meeting once they address outstanding issues with the applicant. Mapleton staff reviewed the application and no concerns were noted. The project will be subject to site plan control, and no negative comments were received from Wellington Source Water Protection, GRCA, or the neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll now hear from the Township Planner, Matthew Daou. Matthew?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Before you today is a zoning bylaw amendment seeking to rezone a portion of the subject lands from agricultural to agricultural commercial. The applicant is seeking the aforementioned amendment to facilitate the construction of a new 26,000 square foot farm equipment fabrication and sales facility. I believe they fabricate some sort of trailer for farm equipment, but I'll let the applicant sort of describe that a bit better than I can. So as noted in my report, the proposed new AC lot is located approximately 240 feet from the neighboring dwelling to the west, it would be. So per Mapleton zoning bylaw, agricultural commercial uses, including display areas, are required to be a minimum of 400 feet. So at this time, planning staff is working with the applicant's agent to review potential options with regards to layout, as well as landscaping and buffering to address that issue. So furthermore, the application would be subject to site plan control, as the clerk had mentioned, where some of the aforementioned items could be further addressed. And with that said, once things are sorted with the applicant, planning staff will prepare a final recommendation as well as a draft bylaw for council's approval. And with that, I'm happy to field any questions.
Thank you, Matt, for those. Now we'll hear from the applicant. I think Brad Gibson is online to speak to this.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Matt did a good job there. That's kind of exactly what we're looking for. The business is they fabricate heavy agricultural dump trailers. So they're large pieces of equipment that require a large building and a large space outdoors to maneuver these pieces of equipment. They're currently operating just kind of around the corner to the east there, and they've well outgrown that location. So they're trying to get a proper setup where they can operate the business properly. Matt had mentioned about the issue with the proximity to the neighboring residents, and we will, I guess, be working with the township and the county, I guess, to come up with a buffering solution for that, to deal with that property. Currently, my understanding from my client, the landowner, and the neighboring residents there, that they're good neighbors, and everybody's kind of happy to come up with a solution there.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. We'll now hear comments from those attending through Zoom. Please indicate if you'd like to speak and state your name and address for the record. We're going to first hear from those in support of the zoning amendment, and then we'll hear a presentation from those opposed. Anybody wishing to speak for the zoning amendment? Anybody wishing to speak against the zoning amendment? Any questions from council? Councillor Graydon.
Yeah, through you to Matt. Are we happy with the setbacks on this? Are they competent? And if they aren't, will that buffer address that you're talking about?
Matt?
Through you, Chair. So yes, that's sort of the piece that we're working with the applicant on, just to confirm that 240 figure is sort of a guesstimate, I should say. The survey didn't reflect the distance exactly to the dwelling, given that the survey is for subject lands and not the neighbor. So it might be a bit more than 240, which would be great. But like the agent had mentioned, the neighbor seems to be okay with sort of the plan moving forward. So we're confident that sort of a buffer, some kind of buffer will satisfy sort of planning staff on this regard.
Thank you, Matt. Other questions or comments? Seeing none. Councilor Craven again.
To you, to Matt, how many employees, or to whoever could answer this, how many employees would they be looking at in there?
Through you,
Matt?
Chair, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'd have to defer to the agent on this one.
Mr. Gibson?
Yeah, I think they currently have about half a dozen to 10 people. The facility is everything. The design of the facility is being set up for 35 to 40 people. So that's what he's hoping to turn the business into.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? All right.
No,
This
I
public-
do, sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Councilor Ottens.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I just want to say up front, our internet here is really terrible tonight. So if I disappear on and off, that's why. I just wondered about the employees. Is that permitted within these sorts of on-farm businesses to have that many employees? I thought there was a limit, a cap to how many.
Matt?
So through you, Chair, this isn't actually an on-farm application. It's rather agricultural to an agricultural commercial. So the AC zone doesn't actually have a cap on employees.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good question, Councilor Ottens. And thanks for the clarification, Matt. Anything else? All right, public meeting is now concluded. And I'll read the recommendation that the zoning application ZBA 2021-04 located at Part Lot 1 Concession 5, 6767 Wellington Road 9, Behringer M&D be received for information. Any further comments or questions at this time? All those in favor? That's carried. We'll move on to the next public meeting. It's a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and give consideration to an application ZBA 2021-05 for proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands located at 7438 Side Road 15. Purpose and effect is to permit a garden suite for a period of 20 years. We'll hear from Mr. Wheeler, Clerk Wheeler.
Thank you. Staff confirmed the following. Property owners and agencies were provided with the required notice on March 24th. Proper postings were completed on March 24th. Mapleton staff have reviewed the application and no major concerns were noted. And no negative comments were received from Wellington Source Water Protection, GRCA, or neighboring landowners.
Thank you, Clerk Wheeler. Mr. Dayu.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, once again. So before you today is a zoning bylaw amendment seeking to permit a temporary use for a garden suite for a period of 20 years. Based on the provided sketch, it appears the proposed garden suite is in accordance with the zoning provisions for a garden suite. And with that said, planning staff have no concerns with the application, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you. Does the owner, Paul or Marie Rabel, have any comments, further comments, questions? All right. Are there any comments from those attending Zoom? We will first hear from those in support of the zoning amendment, and then we'll hear from those unopposed. Anybody wishing to speak in support of this? Anybody speaking in opposition to this zoning amendment? All right, are there any questions from council members? Councilor Ottens?
Thank you. I have no concerns with this particular application, but I do have a question. Within the application included here, they mentioned that it's close enough that there is a potential to attach that to their house if they so desired. And I wondered if that is actually permitted. Or does that make it a whole different type of building? I don't know who can answer that.
Hopefully, Matt.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure if that's the plan. I wasn't conveyed that as a plan from the get-go. In terms of if it's permitted, I don't know off the top of my head. Perhaps Curtis, if you happen to know if.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes, through you, Chair. So I would say that's a different type of application if it was actually connected. Then the idea of a garden suite would be to be separated, but I guess that'd be something that would be reviewed at the building code review as part of the building permit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor.
Yeah, maybe the applicant needs to be informed of that, so they're not counting on hoping to do that in the future. I don't know.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, just a quick question for Matthew. I don't have any concerns either. I'm just wondering how these garden suites differ from an accessory dwelling unit. And I don't know how they're differentiated through the Planning Act.
Matt.
So through you, Chair. So the garden suites are only a temporary use. So they are sort of capped at a maximum size, and there's certain requirements in terms of what the lot area and things like that you need to have a garden suite. And like I said, the real big difference between the additional dwelling unit and this is sort of the temporary piece attached to it, and that it's 20 years rather than the other one where you could have, I guess, forever. So yeah, if that answers your question.
Thank you. Now this one's a little bit different, Matt, in that the proposed garden suite is located in the front of the house. Is that what it is?
Through you, Chair. Yes, so it is located in front of the house. And I'm just looking through the site plan here. I guess through you, Chair, is there sort of a question tied to that?
Well, he's just wondering if it's normal to have this, and it's allowed under the Planning Act to be to the front, closer to the road.
Yes. So it is permitted. So that sort of answers that question.
Yeah, thank you. Just a little bit different than what we normally would see. Any further questions on this? All right, this public meeting is now concluded. And we have a recommendation here that the zoning application ZBA 2021-05 located at part lot 15, concession 13 East 7438 Side Road 15. The Regal P and M be received, and further that the draft amending bylaw is circulated in the agenda be presented to council for first, second, and third reading. Any further questions or comments? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. That's carried. Moving on to our next application. This is a public meeting of the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and to give consideration to application ZBA 2021-06 for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Subject lands are located at 7609 Wellington Road 7. And the purpose and effect is to rezone the lands from agricultural to agricultural site specific and allow accessory buildings to 414 meters squared as opposed to 227.6 meters squared be allowed, and the zoning is a condition of a severance application. Clerk Wheeler, your statutory requirements.
Thank you. Staff confirmed the following. Property owners and agencies were provided with the required notice on March 24th. Proper postings were completed on March 24th. Planning staff did not include a draft bylaw for tonight. That will be provided at the next meeting based on council direction. Mapleton staff reviewed the application and no concerns were noted. No negative comments were received from either Wellington Source Water Protection, the GRCA, or ratepayers during the notice period. However, one late written landowner comment was received, and that will be read during the comments portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Township Planner, Mr. Dew. Matt?
Thank you, through you, Chair. It's a bit lengthier here, but just bear with me. So before you today is a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from agricultural to agricultural site specific. The applicant has received conditional approval on severance application B5420 under the surplus farm dwelling policies. And the zone amendment would be seeking relief for 3 items. So the first being to restrict residential development on the farm parcel, which is approximately 97.4 acres. The second would be relief to the maximum ground floor area for the 4,456 square foot shop. And lastly is to permit a woodworking and cabinetry business on a 2.5 acre residential lot. So planning staff have no concerns with the request to rezone the farmlands to restrict residential and the retention of the existing shop on the residential property. However, we are not in the position to support the woodworking and cabinetry business on the residential lot. So provincial policy states that in prime agricultural areas, permitted uses include agricultural uses, agricultural related uses, and on-farm diversified uses. So the proposal before you today does not align with any of these permitted uses, given that the use is not secondary to the principal agricultural use of the property, i.e. a farm. Therefore, the PPS stipulates that on-farm diversified uses do not apply to small residential lots. Additionally, the official plan does outline policies for home businesses as well as farm businesses. And once again, in line with provincial policy, they must be secondary to the main use of the property as a means of supplementing farm income. So the intent of the official plan here is that these businesses are located on a farm. The business proposal could not be categorized as a home industry, given once again that home industries do require that the business be secondary to a farm, and the proposed use does not meet the minimum 25 acre minimum lot area. So upon speaking with the applicant's agent on this one, it was conveyed that the business is looking to relocate within a 2-year timeline once the financials sort of iron out. And with that said, I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Matt. I think we have Jeff Guzma here to speak for the applicant. Jeff?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Davidson. As mentioned, the application really sought approval for the first 2 things, that is no residence on the farm property, and secondly, the larger accessory buildings on the property. It is recognized that the property is used as a shop. The shop is used for a cabinetry making business now, and the plan is to seek a new location in the very near future. And so really the request is coming down to the first 2 items, not the third, of having the rezoning to allow for the cabinetry business. Otherwise, it's fairly straightforward application. The amount of the buildings being in excess of the standard requirement is not that significant. I think the number is 414 square meters instead of 227. I'm open to any questions. Elka is on the line, and so and also Nate Martin's with us as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Guzma, the applicants want to speak today, or are you speaking just on their behalf?
I'm just open the floor to Nate or okay. We didn't plan on necessarily them speaking. Did you want to add anything, Nate?
Yeah, I can jump in. Mr. Chair, through you. Thanks, Jeff. I am Oka's lawyer, and so I prepared the severance application, but then Mr. Buseman's prepared this zoning bylaw amendment application. So I agree with Mr. Buseman that we're seeking relief right now on number 1 and number 2, which is the rezoning for not permitting residential homes, and then relief from the building size. I want to touch on the buildings. So a little background might be helpful. This farm is owned by our client's mother, and then she owns the neighboring farm as well. That's how we could get the surplus farm dwelling severance. The succession plan right now, and okay, I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn here, but is for the agricultural business to go to his brother, and he's going to end up with this house. So his position is right now he's limited from financing a new location because he can't take a mortgage out on a property he doesn't own. So his hope is to have this parcel transferred to him, and then take some equity out of the property and find a new location because he's outgrown that space. We did disclose on the severance application that there was a commercial business being operated there, and he's also paying industrial tax on that parcel. So we weren't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. We were being upfront the whole way. So just wanted to, I'm happy to take any questions, but that's just how I see things.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Now we'll hear comments from those attending this meeting. Please indicate so with state your name and your address for the record. We're first going to hear from those in support of the zoning amendment, and then we'll hear from those opposed to it. And the applicant may respond to any concerns. So is there anybody here wishing to speak in support of the zoning application? All right. Anybody here wishing to speak in opposition? Yes, I think, go ahead. I have someone listed as Liz. Are you wanting to speak to this?
Yes. It's Red Samus at 7423 Wellington Road 12, right across the road from the property. Is that just going to be a guarantee then that this business is going to be discontinued in 2 years for sure?
Mr. Boozma?
Yeah, that is the plan. That's the plan. Hopefully in a year or so you can move it, but the plan is for sure to get it out there in the next 2 years.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments from you, sir?
Just excuse me, Mr. Mayor, could I just record that
The name?
yes, please.
Could you just state your name and please again?
I was Red Samus and we're at 7423 Wellington Road 12.
Thanks, Red.
All right.
Any other? Sorry?
Am I online?
You are, Brad. Go ahead. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm not necessarily, I guess I'm opposed just because of the water. I was concerned a little bit about the water control of the property. And so I submitted a note. So I'm not sure if that would be read or whether you received that letter that I.
We do have the note, and Mr. Clerk, did you want to read that?
That's
Yes,
fine. That's fine, Mr. Mayor. I'll read it right now, Brad.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me. This property was systematically tiled and tied into a main drain on my property without consent. The sizing of the drains are not large enough to handle the amount of water with spring thaw and large rainfalls. As a result, this creates flooding on my property and buildings. My understanding is water upstream is the responsibility of the landowner. In this case, I believe an additional drain should be installed at the applicant's expense, as we have invested a substantial amount of money to mitigate water erosion and was approved by the GRCA years ago. The water issue has surfaced as a result of tying into our tile, making the volume of water going downstream excessive. Also of concern is Mr. Kelly's ditch off County Road 12 is restricting water volume and needs to be cleaned out. I propose this expense to be shared between the parties involved. Thanks for your consideration, Brad Marquardt.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thank you.
Did you want to add anything more to that, Brad?
Yeah, just again, it was just something that we wanted to bring to the attention of the council. I'm not sure if this is issues for the town council to deal with, but when you said that Grand River didn't have any comments, I believe is what was said earlier. Did Grand River even consider, like, with this application, did they look into it, or who did look into that? I guess.
Clerk Wheeler?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Mr. Marquardt, the GRCA is on the statutory list of agencies that must be circulated with the notice.
Okay.
Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition?
I don't know, you should just do your opposed because
Nothing else? All right.
until that issue is cleared up.
Are there any questions from members of council at this time? And Mr. Samus, we can have you put on mute, please. Thank you. Thanks, Liz. Any questions from members of council? Councilor Craven.
Yeah, if we approve this, can it be on a condition that this water problem that Brad is indicating is resolved? Can we put a condition on there for that?
Matt?
I'll have to, through you, Chair, I'll have to defer to Curtis on this one as well.
I thought you would. Curtis?
No, this is a tough
Pass the
question.
buck. I know how it works. Pass the buck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a tough question. So I think it's difficult as part of a zoning amendment to attach a condition. I guess my question I have is it a municipal drain? If it is identified as municipal drain, there would be mechanisms to deal with it that way. However, if it's not, I don't think that the township can assist them with at this point.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Mr. Craven?
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay. Other questions from members of council? Councilor Douglas?
It's a ward.
Yeah, I'm okay with the first two points. I guess my question is, how do we deal with the timing, and what happens if the timing of the 2 years from now the business is still there? Like, what can we do to put something in place to deal with the timing aspect?
Back to the planners.
So through you, Chair, there's one mechanism that sort of would kick in, and we could sort of incorporate a temporary use bylaw into the new bylaw, hence why we didn't bring anything forward today. So we could include a 2-year timeline within the bylaw, and that would sort of address that issue.
Did that help, Councilor Douglas?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering what the hammer is 2 years from now. Like what happens, even if there's a condition there, like what enforcement would there be?
Through you, Chair, at that point, once the 2 years would lapse, it would be township staff bylaw enforcement to sort of ensure that that's being executed.
Thank you. Councilor Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo actually the concerns of Councilor Douglas. The first two items are are pretty straightforward, like Mr. Boosman and Martin have indicated. I think the context that Nate Martin that you added helps for me as far as this application goes, so I can appreciate kind of the succession planning and the plans of the applicant. I was going to kind of go down the Cat Stevens road. If you want to be a farm, be a farm. But because I do think that it's important to understand that, these rules are in place for a reason. And I think they do need to be followed. The farming community enjoys a great deal of flexibility. And I think it's up to us to make sure that those rules are followed so that we can continue with that flexibility moving forward. And, so I would echo the concerns about, whether it's through this document or something else. There's smarter people than me online here at the moment. I think they can figure this out. And I think we all understand that we don't want to see this business in place going forward. But to echo Councillor Douglas, if there's no hammer, or there's no mechanism to make it or to enforce it, there's always that possibility, right? So not trying to doubt the integrity of the applicant by any means. We're just trying to make sure everybody's covered, that the concerns of the neighbors are covered. And then on the water issue, so it's a question for you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Would our property standards be able to address water moving on to a neighboring property? I know it would in town. I'm not sure if that does out in the country as well or not.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. That'll go to CBO Wright, that question.
Through you, Mayor Davidson, our property standards really doesn't address field drainage, especially when you're looking at tile and municipal drains. I might think we'd have to look into the Drainage Act. So I really can't answer that question well.
Mr. Boozman or Mr. Martin, do you have an answer?
Go ahead, Jeff. Through you, Mr. Chair. Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't know the answer, the mechanism of what committee would ever could look at that. It was a department of the township for sure. I don't know if it's a Drainage Act matter. I'm somewhat familiar.
I was just wondering about the application itself, Mr. Boozman, whether
I'm sorry.
There seems to be some concern about the water that Mr. Marquis has been getting on his property because something that happened prior to. Didn't know whether you're aware of that problem, Mr. Boozman, or is it something new to you?
Yeah, it's new to me.
Mr. Martin?
First I've heard of it as well.
All right. So maybe that's something that the applicant and Mr. Marquis, yeah, go ahead, Brad. You're on mute. Still mute.
There
you go. Yes.
Good. Well, I have a document here since 1951 that's specified from the ward, and the standards are that, and I have the paperwork here, and the standards are that any water that goes from one person's property onto the next person's property, it's their responsibility, and so on down the line. And that's it's been common knowledge for years, and every farmer knows this. So I'm not quite sure how there could, and I guess maybe it's common courtesy or whatever the case may be, but there should be in place when someone's water is coming onto their property and flooding out their buildings or because of this, they are responsible for their water. And I'm responsible for the water that goes on down the line.
Correct. And it sounds like it almost might be a civil matter. Mr. Martin, you had the hand up?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think that this is a matter between two private property owners, and I don't think that this bylaw amendment form is the best place to deal with this. Not discounting your concerns at all. I just don't understand how the council would deal with this.
Yeah, and we're going to move on from that because it is a true fact that CBO Wright has made her comments on it. So let's go back to our planner. So Matt, we're okay with 1 and 2, and because right now all we have for the recommendation is received for information. So we actually don't have any direction right now, Matt. So we need you to give us some direction.
Through you, Chair. So let me know if you could just hear me because I'm having some internet issues, but I think we're sorted now.
I can hear you.
Perfect. So in terms of direction, there's a couple options, I suppose. The first is, like I said, that temporary use. So within the bylaw, we can put in a 2-year temporary use for the business. The other is recognize the business as non-compliant. So like I said before in my spiel sort of thing at the beginning, we aren't in a position to recognize the business within the new bylaw. So it would remain as existing, and ultimately it'd be left on the township on how to proceed on that front.
Thank you. So, go ahead, Mr. Boothman.
We think the temporary use is a good method of doing it, and we're supportive of that option.
Of a 2-year temporary use?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Clerk, do you have that written down?
I do, sir.
All right. And for the planner again, so option or 1 and 2, we're good with 1 and 2, and we just add in the 2-year temporary, and we should be good with this application. Is that what we were saying? Like as long as we add in this 2-year temporary use, this is good to go?
So through you, Chair, I suppose it's ultimately up to council on sort of the business piece. Ultimately, the policies aren't there to support it from a planning perspective, to permit a business on the residential lot. But I suppose, you know, the applicant proposed the 2-year timeline, and that's, I suppose, planning staff working with the applicant on that if council wishes.
Okay.
Your worship, if I may,
Go ahead.
depending on what council decides, if they go ahead and approve it, we can internally diarize it for whatever date you choose to follow up with the applicant to ensure that there's enforcement on the business and the decision.
Thank you. All right, Councilor Martin.
If you need a motion, Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to support the 2-year temporary use.
Okay, we'll get there. We'll get there in a second, Mr. Martin. I'm just going to finish up the Planning Act requirements here. So any more questions or comments from council at this point? Okay. So would all interested persons viewing through Zoom please clearly state their name if they haven't done so yet, address and postal code to be recorded by the clerk. If you haven't given your name and address yet to the clerk, I think Brad, you've sent a letter in, so we'll have yours. Anybody else needing to provide their name or address? All right, this meeting is now concluded. So I do have the recommendation here for council, and I'm just going to read what we have right now, and then the motion can come, Councilor Martin. That zoning application ZBA 2021-06 located at Part Lot 10, concession 14 East 7609 Wellington Road 7. The bills to be received for information. So you have an amendment, Councilor Martin?
Yes, and can I preface it with a quick question?
You can.
Okay, because I know Mr. Marquette and the Samus will be probably prone to pop off after this is over, but how would you like to address the runoff water? Do you want me to do that through a notice of motion to ask staff to follow up? We got really good people that know the Drainage Act, and what's the best way to follow up with the water concerns? I know it's a separate issue, but just so I'm sure not everyone's going to wait around till the very end of this meeting to get to the notice of motion side. So,
yeah, Mr. Barron.
Through your worship, as previously mentioned, I think we need to be cautious of getting involved in that. We can follow up, but it is a civil matter and one that we should likely not inject ourselves in. We can certainly answer any questions that relates to the Drainage Act, and if there is a municipal drain that needs to happen, then we can certainly help out there. And we would be willing to take questions and be available to offer any help or clarity. But for us to action that, I think we just need to be cautious.
Mr. Barron. So we can have to make sure it through the Drainage Act, whether it's a municipal drain, we can look into that part, correct? Okay. And then get back to Brad on it. Okay. does that work for you, Mr. Martin, without having a motion on it?
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you. I just, as long as it can be looked at.
Yeah, well, Mr. Barron will have staff look at the whether it's a miscible drain. Other questions, comments right now from council members? Mr. Martin, you had a amendment?
Yeah, I would propose an amendment to allow a temporary use on this on-site business. However you need to word that. I wouldn't normally, to be honest, but I think given the context that's been provided in this particular application, I think I would be prepared to be a little bit flexible. I think the language is fairly black and white, like Mr. Dayu has indicated already, but I think there's always context, and I think that would be reasonable from my standpoint.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Ottens?
Yes, thank you. Through you, I agree with Councillor Martin on this. I would word it so that it says up to 2 years or a maximum of 2 years, rather than just giving it a flat 2 years, because sometimes that can spread out with grace periods and such. This way it encourages it to close down as soon as possible.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, do you have something written down that we can use? I know that we're going to start out with what I read earlier, be received for information, and further that, a draft amending bylaw.
And further that the existing business be allowed a maximum of 2 years temporary use.
And further that, okay. Does that work with members of council? I need a seconder for the amendment, please. Councillor Douglas, second that amendment. All those in favor of the amendment to the. All right. Mr. Clerk, do you want to read that one more time, please?
And further that the existing business be allowed a maximum of 2 years temporary use.
Thank you. Mr. Dayu, that's workable or Curtis, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, thanks, Mayor. We can take that as direction and prepare a bylaw to come back to the next council meeting for council's final decision.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from council? Then all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Now moving on to the last one here, 6.4. A public meeting under the Planning Act, hear comments from the public and agencies and to give consideration to an application ZBA 2021-07 for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands located at 7192, 7194, and 7198 Wellington Road 10. And the purpose and effect is to rezone the lands to allow a single detached dwelling on the lot. We'll now hear from Clerk Wheeler for statutory requirements.
Thank you, sir. Staff confirmed the following: property owners and agencies were provided with the required notice on March 24th. Proper postings were completed March 24th. Mapleton staff reviewed the application and no concerns were raised, and no negative comments were received from Wellington Source Water Protection, GRCA, or ratepayers.
Thank you, Clerk Wheeler. And now Curtis, we'll hear from you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Davidson and councilors. Happy to be here tonight, and I'll provide you a brief overview of my report regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Just first to clarify that the property actually includes 3 former checkerboard lots, 7198, 7194, and 7192 Wellington Road 10 that we understand have been merged as one lot. And these now merged lots are approximately 0.82 hectares, which is just over 2 acres in size. So as earlier stated, the purpose of the proposed amendment is to rezone the subject lands to provide relief from the minimum distance separation setback requirements, which would ultimately allow for a single detached dwelling to be constructed on the property. The current zoning is agricultural, and there is a site-specific exception which prohibits development until the vacant lots are rezoned to ensure that the specific conditions are met. The subject lands are designated prime agricultural and core greenlands in the county official plan. Note a small portion of the rear of the lot is the area that is within the core greenlands, and this is due to the presence of floodplain and steep slopes. The subject lands are zoned agricultural and natural environment, and as I stated, there is a site-specific exception which applies to this property and actually applies to all checkerboard lots in the township, which prohibits development until specific criteria are met. And just to run through these, the first one is that there's MDS compliance. The lot would have frontage and safe access on a road, that the lot has sufficient lot area and can have a septic system and a well, and that all other zoning regulations are met. So just to identify for council that what checkerboard lots are these are old lots that were created prior to 1970, and at the time you could just simply register lots without a Planning Act approval. So in the report, we've prepared a chart and we've gone through the specific requirements and addressed how they've been met, and I can briefly take you through those. The first criteria is regarding MDS, and this is the one that really requires the most discussion here tonight. So when we have conducted MDS calculations for this lot, we note that there is a setback has been of 203 meters, which is required from the barn across the road at 7199 Wellington Road 10. This barn, I understand, is not currently occupied with livestock. So this is a difference of approximately 58 meters. When we note if we applied on the new lot, there is a minimum setback of 18 meters from the road. And if you measure the minimum setback from the road to the barn for the new dwelling, that would place the setback at approximately 163 meters, and therefore there'd only be a deficiency of about 40 meters. Planning staff note that if the existing barn were to expand, MDS2 would be applied to the measurement from the expanding barn, and this measurement would be taken to the location of a dwelling and not the lot line of the lot. We note in summary that this MDS deficiency, we view this as minor in the circumstances in light of there already are two closer residential dwellings to the barn at 7199 Wellington Road, Wellington County Road. In regards to the other criteria, criteria 2 and 3, which require frontage on an open road and safe access, I can confirm that the County Roads and Engineering Department has no concerns, and they will require an entrance permit. Criteria 4 requires that there's sufficient lot area for a well and septic, and we note that the lot is approximately 2 acres in size, and that should be adequate for a septic and well, and this would be reviewed at the building permit stage. And finally, criteria number 5 is that all the other requirements of the zoning bylaw are addressed, and we note, in our opinion, that they are satisfied. And finally, we note that the GRCA has provided comments and they have no concerns and feel that there's adequate room on the lot to locate a dwelling outside of the floodplain and the slope valley. So planning staff have prepared a draft zoning bylaw which is attached to this report. And I just wanted to highlight that we have included wording in the bylaw to ensure that only one dwelling is permitted, as I don't have 100% confirmation that the lots have been merged, but I believe with this clause that in the amending bylaw that it wouldn't limit one dwelling to be built on the merged lots. So in conclusion, planning staff of the opinion that the site-specific checkerboard requirements have been met, and we've prepared a draft zoning bylaw amendment that would permit the construction of a dwelling on the property, and this is available for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Do the owners, Jeff and Yvonne Ben Suis, have any comments or explanations? Are they online? Yvonne?
Yeah,
Hi.
I'm right here. Hi,
ahead.
thank you. I just want to thank Curtis for his detailed presentation, and I really don't have anything to add. He covered it quite well.
Thank you. Any comments from those attending the meeting? Please indicate so by stating your name and your address for the record. We will first hear from those in support of the zoning amendment and then from those opposed. Anybody here wishing to speak in support of the zoning amendment? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition of the zoning amendment? Questions from members of council? Councilor Martin.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Marshall. You speaking specifically about the MDS concerns that have been laid out. It's been noted that the deficiency is minor that you stated as far as in relation to the farm across the road. Because it's considered minor, and specifically in the absence of a building envelope, right, where you can't really get specific distances. Can there be some language added to protect that farm moving forward? I know these checkerboard lots have been the source of lots of conversations historically. But I do think whether that farm is occupied or not, its entity needs to be protected as a farm. And you did list that, there's two residential dwellings that are located much closer. I would suggest those two residential dwellings are going to have probably less objections to expansion in the future, considered they're family members currently of that farm, right? So would there be a way, I guess, to ensure that, with those checkerboards across the road, not just this proposal, but to the extent that MDS setback affects the rest, that those particular properties objections would be voided moving forward in the event of an expansion of that existing farm. You know what I mean? It'd kind of be a tit for tat, like, sure, you can build a house there now, but if that farm chooses to expand in 10 years, the kids grow up and want to have a dairy farm, that all of a sudden, these investment properties can't hold back a farm, if you know what I mean. Is there language that could be added in that effect? I'm not very eloquent.
I get your question, Councilor Martin. I totally understand. Mr. Marshall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Davidson. So maybe council members, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, we dealt with similar applications for a couple lots, basically right beside this lot. At that time, council had staff, and it was myself, go back and have a look at potential impacts to this particular property, 7199. And at the time, I calculated a few different scenarios for the farm owner. If one of the scenarios were if they were to double the size of their current barn with weaner pigs. We talked about a very large new 4,000 weaner pig barn. And also, I believe I looked at possibly some chicken barns, had my notes here. So in terms of just at the time we looked at this, and I think that was something we considered for these other lots. And unfortunately, in this case, the two existing houses, and even though they are owned by the same family, MDS doesn't take that into account. That these expansions to the existing barn or a new barn would ultimately be limited by those two other houses before they'd be impacted by the new lot across the road. Now, saying that, MDS is tougher on a residential use than it is on an expanding farm. So the MDS does I guess, yeah, it gives consideration that a farm is there and has a right to expand. And when you do an MDS2 calculation, it isn't as strict for a farmer. But saying that, when I did these other calculations, that these other two lots were still basically the control point. Now, in terms of objections from the neighbors, I guess where neighbors would have an opportunity to object is if a new barn was built that needed an MDS relief. I guess the neighbors would have an opportunity to comment then. However, the other thing to note, there are protections for farms and normal farm practices as well. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure if there's a way to guarantee a future, someone agreeing in the future not to have concerns. I guess the answer is I can't think of a way off at this moment to apply that.
Thank you. So what you're basically saying is if the farm wanted to expand, the neighbors across the road or beside them could oppose it, but it'd be up to council at that time to make a decision on it.
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. Further questions, Councillor Craven?
So if we approve this, does this compromise the addition to this barn across the road if they want to expand it? Do they have to expand it in any particular direction? Do they have to go eastward from the barn because it's already compromised by those houses? Are there any expansion limitations to the barn?
Through the mayor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in my review, the allowing a house on this checkerboard lot doesn't really change anything for the barn. The expansion of a barn on that property, it's already the control points. The limiting distance would be to those two other closer houses. So this, in terms of MDS calculation, doesn't make it any worse. However, to recognize that it does, create. At the end of the day, there are additional non-farm residences close to the farm. However, as I said, the MDS calculation simply goes to the closest lot. Or sorry, closest house.
So the farm is already compromised by the houses that are already there. So to add another house across the road from it isn't really going to have any effect on it, except that when they go to expand the barn, one more person to complain.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Councilor Martin?
Thank you. I think, thank you, Curtis, for your explanation. I was hoping that was you there because I remembered a conversation we've had in the past and I just couldn't remember which application. So in the absence of adding something specific to this, is there any way that we could capture this conversation or this discussion in the minutes, at least for future councils? My grandkids, when this comes up, that they could understand what our concerns were, that it could somehow be reflected somewhere.
Clerk Willer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can record that in the minutes, but I believe the only way we can do it is by way of a motion.
Thank you. Other questions, comments on this application? There's no more from council members. The public meeting is now concluded. Thank you for attending the public meeting. We do have a recommendation here that the zoning application ZBA 2021-07 located at part lot 9, concession 10, PCL 23-25, 7198, 7194, and 7192, Wellington Road 10, Suisdale's Holsteins Inc. be received, and further that the draft amending bylaw is circulated in the agenda be received to council for first, second, and third reading. Any questions or comments on the recommendation? Need a mover and a seconder, please. Counselor Otten, seconded by am I talking to myself here? Seconded by who? Can you hear me? All right. Do I have a seconder? Counselor Martin? All right.
Oh, sorry, I was saying I could hear you.
Okay. So I read the recommendation, Counselor Otten, and I needed a seconder. So Counselor Martin, you second it? No?
So can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So what happens? Like, cause this is I think this is a legitimate application by the Van Zeus. It should be the creation of a nice lot, but it's potentially impactful. Curtis has acknowledged the impacts are perhaps going to be addressed by other residences, but like, how do we like make sure that everybody's looked after?
Clerk Wheeler, I think you mentioned that, are you referring back to, Counselor Martin, are you referring back to your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're referring back to your original question? So, Counselor Ottens?
Our meetings are recorded on video, so there's always that to go back to for future councils. The MDS situation, to me, that ship has already sailed here since the other houses are there, regardless of who lived. It's not two houses. From what I see, there's 4 houses, including the owner of the barn. So I really don't see an issue. And I'm the farmer in the group here who would probably feel the most concern about this sort of thing. But there's already houses there. So I feel like that issue is kind of a moot point at this time. And if the farmer wants to expand in the future, then the issue can be brought up by all the residents, the ones that are there already and have been there probably for 30 or 40 years, plus anyone who builds across the road after that. To not allow the one across the road when there's 3 already there seems kind of self-defeating when we're looking for housing.
Councilor
That's my
Douglas?
thought.
Thank you. Counselor Ottens, Counselor Douglas?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Was there no feedback from the owner of the farm? Sounds like no.
Through the mayor, not this time around that I'm aware of. I believe they did write in and speak at the previous applications a couple years ago, but I don't have anything before me this application.
Clerk Wheeler, did you receive anything?
If I did, it would be in the agenda package, and I certainly don't see it there.
Doesn't look that way, Counselor Douglas, that the farm has made any comments to this application, the owners of the farm. So we have a recommendation that's been moved. We're just looking for it to be seconded. So seconded by Counselor Craven. Thank you. Any further questions or comments from this recommendation then? And all those, Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I respect Curtis's opinion as far as he's not sure what could be done, but could we not simply add another comment in regards with, the compliance with MDS, that concerns specific to those lots across the road are just voided moving forward? And like, I don't know if you can put that on title, like let's be honest, like these are investment properties, right? They're new development coming in, and I think these people, which we welcome, like to Councillor Otten's point, we welcome, we want, right? That's very much in demand. But these people should just be aware that when they're building their house on these great little lots, that if that farm expands, you don't have a voice. That's all.
Planner Marshall.
Yeah, it's something that at the moment, there's, maybe a couple thoughts that I have. I mean, if I was I had I guess some time to ponder it a little more, and I could come back with an update at the next council meeting or at a following council meeting, just to see if there's anything in terms of a notice clause or anything like that that could be registered on title. I think in the past there was the ability to do such things. And I understand there's been changes at the registry office, so that may not be as simple as it once was to do that sort of thing. But I could certainly, if I had a little more time, maybe I could come up with something for council's consideration, if that could be of assistance.
Okay, Councilor Martin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I clearly we're referring on the expertise of Mr. Marshall on this. I would make a motion to defer this application pending Mr. Marshall